Hello, and welcome to Rough Edges. I'm your host, Sarah Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create a voice for those who wish to discover more about these topics. This podcast will not only shed light on mental health issues, but will also reveal the intersection between faith and mental illness. I pray that these themes will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. I am here with special guest, Alan Cox. Alan is a mental health change maker on a mission to change the narrative around mental health and help millions of people achieve mental strong well-being. When you hear Alan's story, you might be surprised that he's even alive. Alan is an entrepreneur who has suffered decades of poor mental health. Starting with an abusive childhood, Alan struggled through school and life. As you'll hear, Alan's had setback after setback. In 1995, Alan had a serious work accident, leaving him unable to walk for the best part of a year. This injury sparked a chronic pain syndrome, which he still lives with today. He then worked hard to retrain himself in the then booming internet industry, and he went on to start a successful web consultancy. Just when he started to get ahead with his new phase of his life, the dot-com crash happened and all his business evaporated. Then followed years of struggle to keep his business from going under. Alan now has devoted his life to improving the well-being of millions of people around the world. A crucial part of his mission is Alan's impact business, EverYellow, who have created a fascinating mental conditioning app that is getting great results for those who use it. Alan's background in design thinking, problem solving, business, and his traumatic past, repeated challenges, and his newfound passion for neuroscience and positive psychology give Alan a unique perspective and a rare mix of talents. Alan is a humble, down-to-earth man with a vision to make a difference at scale. You can learn more about his app by visiting the website at www.everyellow.com. Welcome, Alan.
Hello. That was a long intro, but very pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to have you here. So could you tell me a little bit more about yourself? What are 3 things that you're passionate about and why?
Well, I'm passionate about life. That's one thing. That's I think people, as they get older, they lose their passion for life really and just go into kind of existence mode. And I'm really pleased to have found that passion back. As you've mentioned before, I've got a real passion for kind of changing the narrative around mental health. And I can talk more about that shortly. But and I guess just in my own life, I have a passion for walking with my dog and a passion for cycling and a passion for all kinds of things.
Nice. That's amazing. So you touched on it a little bit, but can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with mental health?
Yeah. Yes, it's one I often get asked that question, and it's kind of sometimes difficult to really know what parts to say because I could literally talk for 2 hours. I remember once I sat down with a psychologist when I was going through some troubles, and that was someone that at the end of like an hour of giving my story, she said, "Oh, I can't believe you're even still here," you know. But I guess it really just started from early childhood, like a time when, you know, human beings need love and nurturing. I didn't get a great deal of that, and in fact, from an early age, I got quite the opposite. I was, you know, spoken some pretty like abusive things were spoken to me, like from my mother in particular. That really just shaped me for growing up as a person that was just had very, very low resilience. And I guess things that happen in life to most of us, when those things happen to me, they would affect me much more, you know, and they'd either send me into a deep depression or, you know, cause me to have you know, self-harm and that kind of thing. You know, I think it's been fair to say that, you know, there's been times when, you know, even for the healthiest of person, it would have been very difficult to get through. I mean, the most, you touched on a time when I was really, really excited about migrating from the UK to New Zealand, and very shortly after that opportunity came up, I had a serious back injury where I couldn't walk and I lost my job, and it just looked like my whole future had been taken away from me. And then kind of most recently, I think it was about 10 years ago now, I was nearly killed in the Canterbury earthquakes here. And that was just, you know, obviously a very, very traumatic time. There was, you know, death and destruction all around me, and I had a very close call myself, and again lost my business, and that led to me having a massive mental breakdown. And yeah, that was kind of about the worst it got, really. But you know, it's just been up until that point 10 years ago, it was just like a continuous roller coaster where, you know, there was like you know, it just seemed like just as you was kind of, you know, going up, something would always knock you backwards, and some of those kind of backwards events were quite horrific, you know, and led to me, you know, being suicidal on many occasions, and but I'm obviously very, very grateful that I wasn't successful.
Yes, and it's amazing that you mentioned how, you know, it's kind of like a dichotomy of like when you are succeeding, something happens, like life throws you a curveball, you know? And it's interesting how you built that resilience over time. And it kind of leads into my next question. It's like, what comes to mind when you hear the word resilience?
So what comes to mind for me is basically the kind of I suppose what I would say is kind of like how much cushioning somebody has around events that just happen to them in life. You know, like I think somebody that, you know, that if you kind of think of your well-being kind of thing, or your level of resilience, you know, like on the x-axis of a curve, and then you've got time on the y-axis. I think when you have low resilience, when something hits you, you'll go down much, much further than what you normally would. And you'll also take a lot longer to get back to where you was before. But when you are much more resilient, the kind of the size of the dip is much smaller, and you also bounce back much quicker. And to take that kind of even further is that when you have I believe that when you have very good resilience, there will be many things in life that it won't even produce at any kind of dip at all. It just won't occur to you that it's a problem. Those kinds of things might be, someone cutting in front of you in a car, or someone not holding the door open for you at the supermarket. They're all the kinds of things that, if you're less resilient, those things will have a bigger impact on you.
Right. I'm glad you brought up like the difference in like the threshold of what we can be resilient with, because it's just like some people have a higher threshold for being resilient and other people have a lower threshold. And so I'm glad that you brought up that difference. And so in light of your past challenges, you've been resilient in that you overcame your setbacks in life. So how did you manage to recover from all of that? And what was that process like for you?
Well, I'd actually disagree with what you said, in the sense that I don't think I was resilient, really. I think that a lot of the problems I had were because I did have a very low resilience, which basically was due to the wiring that I developed in my brain, and the belief systems I had in my brain, about myself and the world. That all led me to have quite a low resilience, and it was only really after I recovered from the earthquake breakdown situation, where that was like a watershed moment in my life, really, where I basically thought to myself, Alan, you need to do something here, mate, otherwise you're not going to see your children grow up, right? And I remember having that thought, but having no idea what to do. But what I basically did is I just started to educate myself on what was going on in my head. Why am I like this? What's going on? And through doing that, I basically discovered very early on that whilst my condition is kind of technically in my head, it's actually far from like an imaginary thing. That there are real physical things going on. Like, for example, my hippocampus would have been probably 15 to 20% shorter, smaller than it should be. There would be all these chemicals doing these strange things in my head. I even just by chance discovered like things like if you have a knock on your head at some point in your life, it can basically put like some of your neurons out of place permanently, and that causes you to have kind of permanent damage in your brain, in the same way as any other part of your body can get permanent damage. And then I thought back and thought, oh, there was that time I went into the back of I was on my bicycle and I smashed into the back of a car and head first. There was a time when I was a young baby and my silly dad was pushing me on a swing that didn't have like one of those cradles around it, and I let go at the age of like 2 or something, and smashed my head on the floor from quite a height.
Ooh.
And you start piecing all these things together, and you start thinking it kind of makes sense. It's not actually my fault, and but most importantly, it is in my situation at least, it is fixable. There is a pathway back. So in summary, kind of educating myself was the biggest kind of step for me moving forward.
Yeah, and I like what you said. It's sort of like, there is a pathway back. Like there is a way forward. And I would say that you were resilient in that you were able to overcome like most of the challenges that life threw your way. And I know that you've had a lot of challenges that you faced and you were able to get through them. So I would encourage you that you're very resilient in my opinion. Um, so so
I'll take that one.
yeah. So there is a constant stigma surrounding mental health. And it's a stigma that kind of discourages a lot of people from seeking help. It's a stigma that, you're weak or you're labeled as, psychotic. And there's just this harmful stigma that surrounds mental health, especially with the way it's portrayed in the media. So, what are your thoughts on how the media portrays mental health, and how do you think that affects those who are dealing with a mental disorder?
Yeah, it's actually a very big topic, and the in many in many ways the problem is so big that I don't want to sound defeatist here, but it's kind of so big that you think like I can't see this changing for decades unless something. It's kind of a little bit like climate change, right? Even though we can see the effects of climate change happening all around us, we still haven't got global leaders really taking any serious action. And the same goes with mental health, right? I could talk for a long while about how unhelpful the media industry is around mental health, but I just don't really see what like the value of that would be. They're not going to change at the end of the day, and the media industry is controlled by dollars. They don't really care about what really makes sense to do. At the end of the day, it's all about clickbait, right? And that's not going to change for a very long time, unfortunately. So, with that being said, what can we do to change things, right? Well, I think one of the biggest things we can do in the short term is kind of find ways to kind of circumvent the media and trying to start normalizing what mental health is, and the biggest kind of education piece around mental health, and this is for people that aren't people that are struggling and people that are not struggling. What people just really need to understand about mental health is mental health does not equal poor mental health. It doesn't. Whenever the discussion, whenever we talk about mental health, you automatically think mental illness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is mental health is exactly like physical health, right? You can have you can have an illness, physical illness, such as like catching the cold or something like that, or a flu, or obviously COVID. But if you don't have an illness, that doesn't mean to say that just because you don't have a physical illness doesn't mean to say that you're really, really healthy.
Right.
It couldn't be further from the truth. And exactly the same thing is the case with mental health. What I'd really like us all to understand is that mental health is a spectrum. If you think of a spectrum between, say, 1 and 10, and if you're say under a 3, you probably do have a diagnosable, mental health condition such as depression, anxiety, or what have you, right? But if you're above a 3, let's just go to the other end for a moment. If you're, say, above an 8, say, then you're thriving, you're flourishing, right? You get out of bed full of energy, you're optimistic, you look forward to going to work, you are happy with your life, and there's not really much you would change about things, right? The sad reality is that the vast majority of human beings are far from being that. They're just at various. Most human beings are either mentally unwell, or they are just at various shades of meh. Various shades of grey, or just okay, right?
Right.
And I think the positive thing about thinking about it like that way is when people either have a mental, when they become depressed and things, I think it's helpful to think, well, I'm about here on that spectrum, and I know that I've got a long way to go if I get better, right? And similarly, if you're not on that negative side of the curve kind of thing, then you can start to understand those people better, but also take care of yourself a little bit better as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love that you brought up the fact that most human beings are in that gray area. It's not like a one off where it's like either you're extremely happy or extremely sad. And so it's kind of interesting because when you have a disorder like, let's say, bipolar disorder, that's something that I have. You're always in an extreme state where it's like you're either extremely happy or you're extremely sad. And so you're trying to get to that happy medium. And so it's interesting that you say like most people, and it's true, most people are in that middle stage where it's just like, I'm not extremely happy where everything's going perfect, and I'm not extremely super sad where everything is like going horribly wrong. And so when we humanize mental health and treat it just like you said, of like, it's just as important, if not like just as important as like having a physical illness. Like we always think of mental illness as something that's, like way beyond our grasp, when if it's just like you're thinking of it like if you take medication to help you get better, like physically, you take medication to help you get better and when you have a mental illness. So it's really along the same lines. And so when we get a better grasp of that, I think we can start moving forward to have a humanizing conversation with mental health.
Yeah, I agree. And this is why I'm saying that it's up to people like us, really, that obviously, like the work that you're doing is really important as well. We need to kind of circumvent the normal narrative that's out there in the media. Even some of the really popular websites around well-being, and I won't mention them online here, but when you read those articles, and they're all done by psychologists and people like that, but it's all the same old stuff that's been churned out week after week on a gazillion websites. It's completely inauthentic. It's not human. What we really need to do is starting to break through, as you say, and humanize it, and especially for people that are suffering. One of the biggest problems that they have, and I've experienced this, is that even the people that are closest to them often are really low in giving support because they just don't know how to deal with you, right?
Right.
And it's really hard, especially if you're on a downer or you are depressed. It's really hard to kind of come to terms with that, right? And like we could speak for hours on like, well, why is it that people don't, why is it so hard for people? And there's societal reasons. There's one of the biggest things, and this is one of the things I'd really like to try and push for in the future, is I would really like to see mental health and neuroscience to be a core and significant part of the school curriculum, just in the same way as you learn, biology and physics, right?
Yeah.
And when youngsters leave school, they should have kind of two things. They should have a complete understanding of how their brain, their mind, their emotions, and all of that stuff, they need to understand how it all works, so that like when they do experience anxiety, or they maybe they even get bullied, they can process that properly, right?
Right.
And the second thing that they need to have is basically a toolbox. All right, there's a whole range of things that you can do. Everything from thinking strategies to breath work to meditation, whatever. There's a whole bunch of tools that you can use to basically keep your mind worked out and mentally fit, right? And there are some countries in the world that have already done this. Wales in the UK, I believe they're implementing it this year. It's just been going through all the curriculum design, and that's one of the few countries that I know of in the world that have really recognised the future value to individuals and society by really investing in the education of mental health, and that will certainly go. I think if all countries around the world did the same thing, suddenly I think stigma would be a thing of the past, because everyone would understand each other.
Right. No, I definitely agree with that. And I think the United States should also try to implement that criteria. I mean, we have like psychology majors and all of that, but we never really like implement it into the core of like our educational system. And I think that's something that a lot of people can benefit from, you know? So, yeah, that's just something that definitely has me thinking of ways that I can just like implement it, and even in my conversation in daily life, you know, like just trying to educate people and trying to get them to learn like, hey, this doesn't have to be stigmatized. This doesn't have to be something that's a scary conversation to have, you know? And so
Yeah, and there's kind of a there's another part of it as well. Like I come from an entrepreneurial kind of an innovation background, and what I recognised when I kind of saw the light, if you know what I mean, and I started on my pathway to recovery, I suddenly saw the value of mental fitness, and that one of the things that I think both individuals and companies and governments don't understand is basically like the professional and economic value that people have when they have strong good mental strength. For example, because they have much better social interaction skills, they provide better customer service. They can become much better salespeople. People that have good mental fitness are more creative. They can identify problems that other people don't see. They can solve problems that other people can't solve. So that you actually become a lot more valuable, both in your own career, and then if you start magnifying that up, if a company says, okay, we're going to start investing in the well-being of our people, then they suddenly become one of the best companies in the world. And then if a country does that, like say Wales is doing, and they say, look, we're going to invest in the mental fitness of our people from a very early age, not only to be a prevention so that they don't enter into our health system down the line, because that's a whole nother story, right? But they're actually going to drive, positive societal and economic benefits to our country and make us a kind of have a competitive advantage on the global stage. That's really how we need to start thinking about it.
yeah, that's definitely a great point that you brought up. Just like developing your mental fitness, because I think what it all boils down to at the end of the day is that you gotta have that tenacity. So I think it's important to develop that mental fitness, and as you said, it's like it can help countries and even businesses flourish on a different level. And so, yeah, that's something that's really inspiring. You are just a very inspiring person. And so, what advice do you have for those who are struggling to overcome adversity in their own lives?
Well, I guess in some ways it's a difficult one to answer, kind of just at a general level, right? Because there's just a gazillion things that they could be struggling with, and I don't want to kind of minimise that. I think that can be like a little bit damaging. All I can really kind of say is rather than give advice, I think all I can say is, this is what worked for me, right? Is that there was a time where, my life was kind of quite dark. I felt like I was just in a completely blacked out tunnel, not knowing which way was which. Inside, it was like I just had this big scream building up inside of me, but I just didn't have the energy to scream, right? And for me, as I said earlier, when I started to, just do some basics of learning, like, for example, I couldn't read very well at the time. I was one of those people that, just where I was mentally, I would read a paragraph and I'd forgotten the sentence above, right? So I used YouTube quite a lot, and I was looking at things like neuroplasticity. There was a really good program from the BBC that I'd recommend anyone to watch if either they have depression or anyone else has depression. There's a program called The Truth About Depression, and that was like amazing for me, because like it had all these wonderful graphics, and it showed you like how your hippocampus could be shrunk down because all this shit that's happened in your life, but within 3 months it can come back again, and just me seeing that kind of like mechanically, it was like, I was still in the tunnel, but I suddenly saw the light at the end of the tunnel. So the other thing that I might just say, which might be more relevant to people that it might be relevant to more people, like regardless of what condition that they have, is I basically made a big change in my life when I came to terms with effectively the permanent damage that was in my head, right? So I don't, unlike, so when you have something like, say, a heart disease or, kidney problems or whatever, doctors know exactly what's going on, and they've done dissections and all that kind of stuff. The reality is, we're still like we're just so inferior in what we know about the brain, right? So, but what we do know is that for whatever reason, our brains can become permanently damaged, and for some people, they might have bipolar. Some people have schizophrenia, whatever. For me, my thing is depression, right? And I now know that, after lots of trial and error, I now know that if I don't take just a small dose of antidepressants every day, I will not be good. And I've come to terms with that, and I'm good with it. I don't need to understand what specifically is going on in my head. I've just come to terms with saying, okay, well, shit happens. I've got something going on in my head that needs this other stuff. It makes me who I am. It makes me the individual who I am. Okay, I need to take this medication for the rest of my life. And as soon as I came to terms with that, and I didn't keep on seeing myself as like a victim or something like that, then that was a big step forward as well.
Yes, I totally agree with everything that you just said, and that is great advice. Coming to terms with, your illness, whether you may be struggling with something like that or just daily challenges. I think it's really important. I want to thank you so much, Alan, for joining me today. And if you want to have more updates on this podcast, tune in every week for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to Rough Edges. Feel free to follow this podcast on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast or visit my blog at sarahifox.com. If you have any questions or further suggestions on how to make this podcast grow, you can email at rough.edges.podcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.